He left it all to you? That must be a mistake. That's what my mother said when the lawyer read Grandpa's letter. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just lit the paper like it was a used napkin. No grief, no hesitation, just fire. And as I watched $53 million curl into smoke, I realized it wasn't about the money. It was about erasing me. I didn't shout. I held what was left, the ash, the silence, the truth. Because sometimes being disowned isn't the end. It's when you finally see who they really were all along. If you've ever been the one they tried to rewrite out of your own story, leave a 1 in the comments. If you haven't, count your blessings. Drop a 0 because this time, I didn't burn down. I rebuilt. Have you ever watched your parents burn $53 million like it was yesterday's junk mail? The moment didn't feel real, not at first. It was like watching a movie from behind glass, the kind where everything is slowed down. But your heart is racing like it knows how much this will cost you. We were all seated stiffly in Grandpa's attorney's office, heavy brick walls, stiff velvet chairs, and a clock ticking like it had somewhere better to be. Outside, the smell of gingerbread drifted in from the bakery 2 doors down, but inside, it was colder than the wind. I hadn't seen my parents in months, not since Grandpa fell ill. The grief still clung to me like fog, thick and suffocating. But the moment Wayne and Lorraine Marin, my father and mother, entered that room, their expressions weren't sorrowful. They were composed, armed even. Dad's jaw was tight, the veins at his temple sharp as lines drawn with a ruler. Mom had her hair twisted into that perfect chignon, pearl earrings in place, and her lips fixed in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Erin sat next to me. She didn't say a word. Her hands twisted the sleeves of her cardigan, eyes down. I wanted to reach for her, but the space between us felt like a canyon. The lawyer cleared his throat and unfolded the envelope. It was cream, thick, the kind Grandpa used for Christmas letters. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. To my granddaughter, Delaney. I didn't hear the rest at first, just the blood rushing in my ears. I blinked, lips parted. The words felt heavy, surreal. I leave to you the investment account valued at approximately $53 million. I do this not out of favoritism, but because I believe you will protect the integrity of our name. You carry the legacy with humility. That is rare. Dad stood abruptly. The chair screeched backward. This is nonsense! Mom didn't flinch. She reached into her purse and pulled out her gold-plated lighter, the one she used at holidays to light the taper candles. Calmly, like she was starting a fire in the fireplace. She touched flame to the edge of the document. No, I gasped, but the flames had already caught. The crackle of paper burning was the only sound in the room. Sylvia, Grandpa's friend of 40 years, reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Her eyes shimmered, but she said nothing. I think if she'd spoken, I would have broken down. But she didn't. She gave me that grace. I didn't cry. I just watched. Watched the flames curl the paper like it was trash. Watched the ashes fall like it meant nothing. My father's voice sliced through the silence. Your grandfather was sick. You know that. This is not legal. This isn't real. Mom nodded, her tone even. He was confused, Delaney. And even if it were real, what kind of person would accept such a thing? Me. That's who. The kind of person he trusted. But I said nothing. My hands were balled so tightly in my lap, my nails dug into my palms. Erin still didn't look at me. I felt the cold grief that comes not from death, but from betrayal. Grandpa was gone. But this? This was a second death, a cremation of truth. As the lawyer stammered something about copies and legal procedures, I already knew. They'd try to erase me, rewrite the ending, acting like this was a fluke. But I'd seen the signature. I knew his handwriting. I knew the way he curled the Y in Delaney, the same way he did on every birthday card. That was no forgery. When I was 10, Grandpa had given me a compass. "Not for direction," he said, "but to remind you that you always have one." He used to say our family lost its true north when everyone started caring more about what the neighbors thought than what we thought of ourselves. I remember those summer afternoons on his porch, sipping sweet tea, him telling stories about how our ancestors built from dust and held on to honor like it was gold. And now, all of it, burned. By the same people who claim to protect our name. I looked down at the charred remains on the carpet. Some part of me wished it would spark again, rise like a phoenix. But it was just ash, scattered like the memory they were so eager to erase. "Don't be dramatic," Mom snapped as she noticed my gaze. "It wasn't even notarized." I turned to her. "You think a signature defines love?" Dad stepped forward, his voice low, heavy. "You don't understand the damage this causes. Your grandfather's mind wasn't stable." "He knew exactly what he was doing," I said, finally standing. My legs shook, but my voice didn't. "He knows who you are, and who I'm not." As we stood to leave, Dad leaned toward me, voice low. "If you push this, Delaney, you'll regret ever coming home." I whisper back, "I already do." My debit card declined. The account closed. The woman at the bank looked at me like I'd vanished. I stood there, still clutching the small bag of groceries. Eggs, milk, and a gingerbread candle I hadn't needed, but picked up anyway. The line behind me grew awkwardly silent. The woman behind the counter, Mrs. Teague, frowned gently, typed again, and then offered me the same expression she used when my dog had died back in high school. "I'm sorry, Ms. McKinley," she said. "There seems to be no account associated with your name." The plastic card was still warm from my hand. I didn't speak. Instead, my ears buzzed with the quiet hum of overhead fluorescent lights and the soft background of silver bells playing somewhere in the lobby. When I was 17, Grandpa gave me my first bank card at this same branch. He wore a sweater with 2 elbow patches and smelled like black coffee and old books. "This one's just for you," he'd said, placing it in my hand like it was a family heirloom. "In case the world ever forgets who you are." Apparently, the world had taken him up on that. I asked to speak to the branch manager, and Mrs. Teague nodded quickly, ushering me into a small office that smelled of pine and printer toner. The candle on her desk flickered beside a stack of unopened mail. I could see the concern flicker beneath her practiced politeness. "There must be a mistake," I said. She smiled with the kind of sympathy reserved for people who couldn't admit the inevitable. "We can file a case with corporate, but from what I see, the account was closed from the outside. Paper trail ended last Thursday." Last Thursday was the day after Grandpa's will was read. She didn't say it, but I saw it in her eyes. It wasn't just a glitch. I drove straight to the house I once called home. Mom answered the door with her usual soft smile, holding a china teacup like we were in the middle of a snow globe scene. "Darling," she said sweetly, stepping aside to let me in. "How lovely of you to stop by." The warmth of the pine candle was replaced by the sterile chill of the foyer. The house smelled faintly of nutmeg and bleach. "I went to the bank," I said. "Oh, banking's a mess this time of year." She waved a manicured hand like she was swatting away a fly. "Happens to everyone. I'm sure it'll sort itself out." Her earrings sparkled like little snowflakes catching the light. I almost believed her. until I looked at the wall behind her. The family portraits were still there. Graduation shots, Christmas dinners, the cheesy cruise trip to the Bahamas in matching polos. Only, I wasn't in any of them. I stepped closer, inspecting the nail holes where my face once smiled. The frames had been rearranged, balanced, as if I'd never existed. "Where's the photo from Dad's retirement party?" I asked. "Oh," she said, sipping her tea. "It didn't go with the new color scheme." I didn't go with the new color scheme. My hands felt cold, even inside my coat. I made my way upstairs, out of habit more than hope. The door to my old room was open, and inside was a catalog-perfect guest lounge. Beige walls, bland art, and not a single trace of my existence. Even the scuffed floorboard by the window, the one Dad always meant to fix, was replaced. The bookshelf was gone. The mural I'd painted at 16, covered. I made my way to the attic, feeling like I was digging through someone else's life. Dust clung to the beams, and cobwebs tickled my face. In the far corner, under a yellowed sheet, I found a small shoebox. A label on the lid read just one letter. D. Inside, a single postcard. Grandpa's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I probably told you not to trust them. Trust yourself instead. Love, always." No photos, no yearbooks, no trophies, no childhood, just a box, and that voice echoing through the silence. That night, I lay on the twin mattress in a friend's spare room, staring at the ceiling. Every corner of the world I thought was mine had been erased, not lost, deliberately wiped away. Have you ever looked around and realized your childhood had been edited out? On purpose? If your memories were ever treated like clutter, leave a comment number 7 below. Now, let's see what happened next. Then my phone rang, private number. I answered. A male voice, low and unfamiliar, said just one thing. "You weren't supposed to come back." She ordered my favorite coffee without asking. A trick, or a trap. It sat between us like a peace offering, steam rising in curls that smelled of peppermint and memory. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Not yet. Erin was already cradling her own drink, both hands wrapped tightly around the cup, as if it might shatter otherwise. She looked tired in the way grief makes you look, pale under the eyes, as if she'd been crying for too long or not at all. Her hair was pulled into the kind of bun that said she hadn't planned to leave the house this morning. The cafe had changed. It used to be called Sugar and Steam, walls once cluttered with local art and handwritten notes from loyal customers. Grandpa used to sneak us here on Saturday mornings after pretending to take us to the library. We'd split an oversized cinnamon roll and laugh over cocoa, daring each other to balance whipped cream on our noses. Now the place was all steel accents and Scandinavian minimalism. Cold chairs, clean lines, a distant hum of holiday jazz looping without commitment. I finally said, "You knew I liked peppermint mocha." Erin glanced up, her lips parting as if to smile, but she thought better of it. I remembered. I wrapped my fingers around the cup. It was too hot. "Why am I here?" She blinked. "Because I asked you to come." "That's not an answer." She sighed, shoulders folding in slightly. "I didn't know what they were planning, Delaney." "Didn't know or didn't want to?" She flinched. "I found out after the will, after the accounts." I stirred the drink with the wooden stick they'd given me. "Did they tell you why?" "They said it was about protecting the family, that Grandpa had made a mistake." "Do you believe that?" She didn't respond, just stared at the froth on her cup. "Did you sign anything?" "No," she said quickly, too quickly. "But you saw something." She nodded, barely. "Just forms, legal stuff. I didn't read it all." But you signed. Aaron said nothing. I asked you once, years ago, if you'd lie to them. You said you'd never do that to me. I didn't think it would come to this, she whispered. I thought they were just upset, that it would pass. You thought they'd erase me and that would be okay? Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were for me or for the version of herself she still wanted to believe in. I looked down at my coffee. The whipped cream had begun to melt, leaving a pale swirl on top, like memory dissolving. I remembered the last time we shared a drink here. 15, maybe 16. We ditched final exam prep and sat at the corner table, daring each other to guess what Grandpa had bought us for Christmas. She guessed wrong. I guessed right. He bought us both journals with leather covers and little golden keys. I still have mine, I said softly. She blinked. What? The journal? I kept it. I didn't say I'd written in it just once, the day after he died, and never again. We used to bake cookies together, she murmured, hide in the pantry with flour all over our faces. Grandpa would peek in and say, "This kitchen's too small for all this rebellion." That's a nice memory, I said. You'll get to keep it. She winced like I'd slapped her. I'm not the enemy. Then tell me, if I disappear, do you inherit everything? The words dropped between us like an anchor. She froze, eyes wide, lips parted. But no answer came. A beat. 2. Then she stood. I shouldn't have asked you to come, she said, her voice dry. I thought I could fix something. Maybe I was wrong. You were wrong, I said, but not about the coffee. That caught her. Her mouth twitched into something between regret and amusement. And then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small yellow sticky note, and placed it next to my coffee. Unit 19B. You didn't get this from me. She didn't say goodbye. The bell above the cafe door jingled as she left, and cold air rushed in behind her. I stared at the note. Outside, snow had begun to fall, gentle, almost apologetic. I took a sip of the peppermint mocha. It still tasted wrong. The lock clicked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, everything smelled like him: cedar, ink, and quiet rebellion. I stepped into Unit 19B like I was crossing a threshold between worlds. The girl I had been outside, and the woman I might become inside. The cold from the steel walls seeped into my skin, but it was the silence that truly chilled me. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of memory. It hung in the air like dust. Boxes, neatly labeled in Grandpa's slanted hand, some with dates, others with single words. Estate. War room. Delaney. I didn't go for the labeled one first. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the box with my name, unable to touch it. Instead, I opened one marked clock. Inside lay an Elgin pocket watch in pristine condition, its chain coiled like a question. The ticking was faint, but it was there, steady, defiant. Next came the envelopes. 5 of them, tied with a green ribbon, brittle with time, but carefully preserved. One was addressed to me. The others bore names I didn't recognize. Lawyers, maybe. I read mine last. I wasn't ready for what it might say. A folder at the bottom of the box was thicker than the rest. Legal tabs, signature pages, notarized stamps. I didn't know the language well, but I recognized the intent. A counter-will, a legal contingency, one that nullified the burning of that check. The letter inside the folder was dated exactly 1 week before Grandpa died. Delaney, it began, I hope you never need this. But if you're reading it, it means they proved me right. Again. I sank down onto the concrete floor, legs folded under me, clutching the papers like a lifeline. His handwriting wavered near the end, But his words were sharp, deliberate. They won't believe you. They will say you made it up, that I was senile or coerced. That's why I left a trail they can't erase. Melba knows. She kept her own copies. And if you're holding this, it means you already know where to find her. Melba. Of course. I drove straight from the unit to the diner off I-75. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed its wallpaper since 1987. Booths cracked with age, coffee burnt and bitter, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't played a song in years. Melba looked exactly as I remembered. Straight posture, pressed blouse, hair pinned tight. But when she saw me, her eyes softened. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I didn't know who else to trust." She didn't touch her coffee. "He always said you'd be the one to listen, even if it hurt." I placed the envelope on the table. "He knew, didn't he? He knew they'd tried to rewrite him. He didn't think it would be this soon. He called me steel-wrapped kindness once. I didn't understand it then." "You do now?" I nodded. Melba reached into her coat and handed me another folder. Thinner, but just as significant. His lawyer's real draft, filed separately. Time to go public if anything happened to you. But they closed my accounts, erased me from the family. I didn't just lose the inheritance, I lost existence. That's why this matters. It proves you're not crazy. I opened the second letter. Grandpa's words, more personal, less legal. "If they burned your name, let it rise from the ashes, but only if your silence is no longer your armor." It wasn't just a farewell, it was a challenge. I sat back. The cold cup of coffee in front of me had gone stale. My hand went to my coat pocket, where I'd tucked the handkerchief I found in the box, embroidered with a single letter, D. For the first time since his funeral, I let myself cry. Not because I was broken, but because I realized he never left me defenseless. Before I left the diner, Melba said something that stayed with me. "Truth doesn't always save you, Delaney. Sometimes it isolates you first. You still willing to carry that weight?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the cracked mug between my palms, then looked up. If I don't carry it, no one will. On the drive home, I replayed one moment from years ago. Me, sitting on Grandpa's lap in that sunlit den, his fingers guiding mine as we wound the old Elgin watch. "Even when people lie," he whispered, "time doesn't." Now, as that same watch ticked faintly in my coat pocket, I knew the truth wasn't just behind me. It was coming with me. If they burned your name, let it rise from the ashes, but only if your silence is no longer your armor. They threw a party to erase me, so I brought the guest of honor, the truth. The ballroom glittered like a lion's silk. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto white linens, and a jazz trio played a version of "Let It Snow," so smooth it barely brushed the ear. My heels clicked against the marble floor, deliberate and measured, the only sound that didn't apologize for being here. Eyes turned as I entered, some wide with confusion, others narrowing with recognition. My dress was navy, Grandpa's favorite. Not black like mourning, but not festive either. I wasn't here to mourn. I was here to remember, to reclaim. At the far end, an ice sculpture of Grandpa's company logo gleamed under spotlights, slowly sweating itself into a puddle. Guests circled it, sipping red wine like it was communion. My parents stood at the center like monarchs, radiant in tailored elegance, their smiles as rehearsed as the evening. Dad took the microphone first. His voice was steady, almost warm. "Tonight, we honor a great man, a builder, a father, a legacy, pause. Not a flicker of acknowledgement in my direction. He taught us to strive, to elevate, to never forget where we came from. He looked toward Mom, who nodded, lips tight around her glass. And though he's no longer with us, his vision lives on, in this family, in this company, and in all of you. Polite applause, safe words, sanitized. I stepped forward before the mic could be handed back. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. I have something to add, I said. People turned. Whispers stirred. I pulled the slim leather folder from my bag, placed it on the podium, and opened it. Inside, carefully stacked, were the contents of Unit 19B. Documents, a notarized letter, the counterwill, Grandpa's truth. I stand here not just as Delaney Pierce, granddaughter of Theodore Pierce, I began, voice clear, measured, but as the person he chose to carry forward what truly mattered to him. Not stock portfolios or press releases, but integrity. Gasps mingled with the jazz. Jeanette, standing near the bar in a midnight pantsuit, stepped forward. "These documents," she said, holding one up, "have been verified. Mr. Pierce's intent is clear and legally binding." Silence. Dad's face froze. Mom's fingers twitched around her clutch. I continued. "If you erased me to protect your pride, then let your shame do the same now. Have you ever been forced to fight for the truth in front of the very people who erased it? If standing alone ever made you stronger, drop a comment 9 below. You're not alone. Let's see what came after." And then, it unraveled. Some guests looked away. Others whispered behind their hands. A few nodded faintly, memories resurfacing. Grandpa teaches Sunday school. Grandpa paying off someone's mortgage. Grandpa chose honesty over comfort. My mother approached, slow and regal, her heels silent on the carpet. She leaned in close, her voice a breath. "You think this ends here? The will wasn't the only thing Grandpa left unfinished." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I let her words hang in the air like a threadbare curtain about to rip. The crowd behind her had shifted. Cocktails paused midair. Laughter long vanished. I caught Erin near the back, half shadowed beneath a sconce, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She wasn't crying, not tonight, but her eyes were glassy, wet with a kind of exhaustion that felt familiar. Mom retreated with poise, but I noticed the tremble in her jaw. Jeanette handed me another paper, one she'd held in reserve. "There's a clause here," she said quietly. "If this party was used to discredit you, it could nullify their claim to legal stewardship." My heart knocked once, hard. So Grandpa had thought of even this. Their spectacle could become their undoing. The chandeliers above me glittered, but I only saw Grandpa's eyes, the way he looked when I brought him tea during his last winter. His hands shook then too, but not from fear. From the weight of a life lived unsparingly. The jazz trio faltered into silence. Someone cleared their throat, awkwardly. So I spoke again. "I don't want a throne. I don't want revenge, but I will not be buried beneath a lie." I turned away from the microphone, walked the perimeter of the room slowly, passing faces that had once cooked over me in bonnets and Easter dresses. Some looked away. Some nodded. Some seemed to silently apologize. And then, near the bar, Erin met me halfway. "I didn't know about the party," she whispered. "They just said it was for appearances." I gave her a tired smile. "That's the problem. Everything with them is. I didn't sign anything this time." "I believe you," she exhaled, shaky. "Unit 19B was just the beginning, wasn't it?" I nodded. "Apparently, there's more." I stepped into the hall alone, the cold from the night leaking in through the marble entrance. I paused by the grand mirror outside the ballroom doors. My reflection looked steady, composed, unfamiliar. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel erased. I felt like a name carved in stone. I didn't win. I reclaimed. The cemetery was quiet, except for the snow crunching beneath my boots and the occasional sigh of wind that tugged at my coat. I carried only a small envelope, what remained of the check my parents had set aflame, and a photograph, creased from years of being moved but never forgotten. In it, I was 6, seated on Grandpa's lap, mid-laugh, both of us wearing ridiculous Santa hats. I knelt beside his grave and laid the envelope and photo gently at the base of the headstone. The snow had dusted it like powdered sugar on shortbread. The granite read, Harlan T. Morgan, husband, father, grandfather. Truth never falters. I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered, You were right. Later that day, I returned to the small apartment I'd rented just outside town. A modest one-bedroom with thin walls, creaky floors, and a heater that rattled when it worked. But it was mine. Waiting at my door was a small, weather-worn parcel addressed in familiar handwriting. Aaron's. Inside was a notebook bound in cracked leather, D's reckonings, and a single note that read, He said if they ever took your name, he left you his. I ran my fingers over the cover before flipping it open. The first page began with a sentence in bold ink. If Delaney reads this, she chose not to run. The journal chronicled Grandpa's thoughts from the last 4 years of his life. Some entries were mundane, notes on stocks, to-do lists, reminders to refill prescriptions. Others cut deeper. They lie to her face, and still she shows up. That's courage. Lorraine says she's fragile. She means Delaney still feels. I pray she never stops. Page after page, his voice echoed between the lines. Some entries ended abruptly, others trailed off like thoughts unfinished. In one, he had doodled a little Christmas tree in the margin, beneath which he'd written, The only gift that mattered, her integrity. I placed the notebook on the bookshelf next to his old Elgin watch, the embroidered handkerchief with the letter D, and the very first letter he ever wrote me, back when I turned 10. A shrine not to mourning, but to memory, to endurance. Later that night, as the wind whispered against the window panes, I found myself reaching for the small leather notebook tucked in Grandpa's journal box. It wasn't labeled, just worn at the edges and sealed with a thin red string. When I opened it, I found only a single entry inside. If she's reading this, she survived them. That's enough for me. It wasn't dated, but the ink looked fresh, as though it had waited just for this moment. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those words. Time dissolved. Somewhere between silence and breath, I understood. He hadn't left me instructions. He'd left me permission to move on, to be more than what they tried to reduce me to remember joy without bitterness. There's a photograph on my fridge now, taken when I was 8. Me on Grandpa's shoulders, both of us covered in flour, grinning like we'd conquered the world. That day, we had tried to bake a pie and failed miserably. The crust had burned, the filling leaked, and we ended up eating canned peaches from the tin. But I never felt more loved. Funny how the most broken things can still feed you. I lit a final candle that night and watched it flicker beside his watch. The room didn't feel empty anymore. Outside, the snow kept falling. Not harsh, not cruel, just quiet, like the truth. And somewhere in that silence, I found what they couldn't burn. I found myself. In the days that followed, I began to write, not for courtrooms, not for headlines, but for me. Pages of reflections, memories, even forgiveness. I wrote about the time Grandpa taught me how to mend a cracked mug, whispering, "Flaws can hold stories if you let them." I drank tea from that same mug the next morning, tracing the gold line where the crack had been sealed. It reminded me of everything he'd tried to teach me. Resilience wasn't loud. It was quiet, stubborn, and enduring. I opened a new envelope. This one I left blank. A placeholder for what's next. Whatever it may be, I'll meet it whole. Some days, I still reach for things that aren't there. A voice, a touch, a history that refuses to stay whole. But through the silence, I've learned that not all truths come wrapped in comfort. Sometimes, claiming your story means letting go of the one they wrote for you. I've come to believe that healing isn't about forgetting the fire. It's about tending to what still grows from the ashes. If this story stirred something in you, feel free to share a piece of your own. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, you're welcome to follow along. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.